Well, hello and welcome back to Toy Thursday with Johnny Tiger. The date is March 30, 2023, and for once we are doing this episode a little bit earlier in the day, so you guys might notice that the lighting is different. Hopefully the lighting is okay. Actually, I mean, it seems pretty bright to me, and I can barely see. But uh, we are using natural lights today rather than the indoor electric light. So you guys can let me know how it look in the comment section. If it's crap, if it you can't see it at all, or what's going on. Okay. Like I said many times before, this is the only way a blind YouTuber, photographer, filmmaker can learn is from criticisms and feedbacks. If you guys don't tell me anything, I'll just assume that everything works fine and keep on making perhaps crappy looking videos. Oh well, as long as no one tell me they're crappy looking, I'll just go on assuming they're great looking video. You know what I mean. So anyway, any glitches, problems, be sure to let me know. So today is National Doctors Day. Now I know a lot of us kind of feel two ways about doctors. Doctors is one of those things that when we are sick, we really need them and we want to see them and we appreciate them. But when we are not sick, then a lot of us start to say, they're just a bunch of cracks. And like, I always have to wait for ages to get my appointment. What do those guys do anyway? They don't ever heal anything. They just assign medications and write prescriptions. They're just a bunch of useless blah blah blah. But you can't deny it. When you really need them, you really, really do need them. Uh, it is honestly. I mean, I know the bad ones out there, and the mediocre ones, and ones that don't seem to know what they're doing. But really, it is a very sacred, very uh, admirable profession to be in. Takes so much work to become a doctor. One of my best buddies is in the process of becoming a doctor. He just, I think, just finished his second year medical school. He is working so hard. So my hats off to you, uh, my brother Wesley. Uh, Hope that after a couple more years you'll be a doctor and you'll start making loads and loads of money. Yeah, yeah, that would be nice. Um, so Doctor's Day is definitely something worth celebrating. A little bit of history. The first person to start celebrating Doctor's Day was March 30, 1933. And this was started by a doctor's wife who decided that they should honor all the deceased doctors by placing flowers in the cemetery by their tombstone. Now, why did they pick uh, March 30, you may ask? Because in 1842, March 30 was the first time ether anesthetic was successfully used in surgery. So that's a very big day. Like, just imagine if we don't have anesthetic. Just imagine how impossible surgeries may be. So, yeah, 1842, March 30, anesthetic. First being successfully used during a surgery that removed a tumor from the patient. Finally, in 1991, Doctor's Day on March 30 every year was officially declared by the U.S. President, then President George Bush. So there you go. There's a little factoid on National Doctor's Day, March 30, every year. And to open the show, we have a very logical candidate, of course, Dr. Reed Richard, aka Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four. Now, a lot of you may be thinking, well, why don't you just do an episode on him? And maybe I will someday, but honestly, I didn't want to use National Doctor's Day on him. mostly because it's too obvious. It's like a no-brainer. But also, I am just not a big fan of Mr. Fantastic. I'm sorry, guys. If you like the character, that's great. But to me, he is a bit of a twat. Like, he's one of those guys with a silly superpower that it kind of make it up as you go. Okay, so we know he can like stretch to uh, great lengths. He can warp his body shape. He's like his body works like rubber, and somehow his body is tough enough to deflect bullets and explosions, and somehow his internal organs still work and all that stuff. Like his superpower is silly to me. It's like uh he's like Elastic Man from DC Comics, sort of. Uh, and a lot of time, like he get out of tight spot by doing weird stuff with his body that the comic author or writer just think up on the spot. And you think, well, does that even make sense? It Yeah, okay, whatever. The guy has that kind of body and it's just weird. Uh, and then he's always really smug and he's super smart, so that's why he can be snobbish and smug and like I know more than you. You don't understand what you're dealing with. And guys, you guys have no idea what this is about. And things like that. Yeah, give it a break, Richard. Uh, so Richard is not, you can already tell, not my favorite character. Not one of the characters I like. Um, and it's just the way it is. I like the Fantastic Four as a team. I think they have great team dynamic. I like the Thing and Johnny Storm, of course. His name's Johnny. I have to like him, and he has firepower. That's really cool. But yeah, Invisible Woman really boring. Mr. Fantastic really annoying. So that's actually the real reason I don't want to do an episode on Richard today because I just can't stand the guy. Instead, I'm going to take you way back in time to look at a retro action figure. Yeah, he is a bit of a stretch for Doctor's Day, but he has a doctor in his title, and he definitely is a mad scientist. So I think he fit the theme of the day. I know, it's supposed to be about medical doctor, not that kind of doctor, but hey, the guy basically turned himself into a cybernetic skeleton. You can't tell me that he doesn't have medical knowledge. You need to have medical knowledge to get that crap to work. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the Dr. Cyborn from Skeleton Warriors. Of course I am. Now, a lot of you that grew up in the 90s and 80s might remember this cartoon, even though it had a relatively short run. Skeleton Warriors. On the premise itself, it's not all that interesting. Okay, so good guys, bad guys, fighting over a planet or kingdom, and the bad guys always cause mayhem, and the good guys have to go deal with them. Good guys uh, uh, muscle, swords, bad guys, skeletons, and evil, genius, and all that stuff. Yeah, like it's a very generic setup as far as cartoon go, but it's for children, so you can't make it too complicated. You don't want too much politics. Although, uh, really, I must say, as far as cartoons go, Skeleton Warrior was really scary. Like honestly, the first time I came across these action figures when I was a child was that 1994, I believe. 1994. That was when I first acquired these Skeleton Warrior action figures. So these figures are pretty old. Uh, I didn't know anything about the show until much later. I knew they were toys first, and then it wasn't until almost like 2005 that I realized these were from a cartoon. And then I tracked down the cartoon eventually on YouTube and watched it. Yeah, I know I'm an adult watching cartoon, so bite me. But anyway, back to when I first came across these toys. Skeleton toys are relatively rare unless you have the like Halloween skeleton uh, replicas and stuff like that. But we don't count those. Those don't have stories to them, or they don't have like they're just boring, generic skeleton, right? But skeleton warrior, they gave you okay, like just right here, we have a skeleton that is half robot. He's a skeleton with cybernetic implants. He's a Terminator skeleton, in another word. And then in the show, we have skeletons that have 8 arms. We have skeletons that have 2 heads. We have a creepy female skeleton that try to be all seductive, but she's a skeleton, and that just make it really scary. And then we have like Baron Dark, their big boss, who is a big skeleton dude with like skulls all over his shoulder. I don't know if those skulls are like just decoration of part of his makeup, but yeah, like Skeleton Warrior gave us skeletons that really look threatening and scary. And like I said, the first time I came across these action figures, it blew my mind because I never came across anything like it. Like, okay, Superman, Batman, He-Man, whatever man, Spider-Man, Captain America, all those people, all those superhero action figures have kind of a shared element. Okay, big muscles, big armor, or big shield, or big sword, and they have human features that look cool and stuff like that. But things like Skeleton Warrior, at least the bad guy in Skeleton Warrior, because the good guys were really boring. The good guys is like a He-Man knockoff, the good-looking dude with a sword. Okay, yeah, whatever. Not interested. But the bad guys were these amazingly creepy skeletons that, unlike anything that came before them, the only other cartoon that I could think of that equally scary in design was Inhumanoids in the 80s. Again, Inhumanoids have really short run, so a lot of people might never have heard of that. I'm kind of thinking that Inhumanoid and Skeleton Warrior probably suffered the same fate. They both lasted a very short time because of how scary they were for children. Like these were cartoons meant for children, and yet I can imagine that some children would have nightmares after watching these, and parents probably, see these on the shelf in the toy aisle, and oh no, I can't have my kid playing with this. This is scary. Like look at this. This guy is seriously creepy looking. A skeleton with machine parts grafted all over him. Like, okay, they try to make the color a little bit like a really bright and toy-like and stuff like that for the most part, and that make it a little bit less scary, I guess. It's not covered in blood and gore and stuff like that. But still, if you are old enough to conceptualize what a skeleton is. Okay, this comes from inside a person, right? If you're old enough to conceptualize what bionics, implants, and all those things entail, what you have to bolt and screw to the bone, and all that stuff. This, yeah, it just kind of make your stomach clench. And how was this thing even made? As far as action figure went, these were fantastic action figures. I will tell you that. Like, these were made, like I said, in mid 90s. They were so creepy looking, interesting looking. They were made by a company called Playmates. They're still around. You can find Playmates action figures. They mostly make Star Trek and Karate Kid and Ninja Turtles nowadays, they are honestly like not as big as they used to be. Playmates used to make some really cool stuff like Xena, Princess Warrior, and Gargoyle. Actually, no, Gargoyle was canon. Playmates did Tomb Raider and a lot of other cool stuff in the early 2000s and late 90s. Uh, Back then, they were a bigger brand than they are now. But yeah, they are still around. And back then, they did Wildcats. That's another line that I really love. We'll look at Wildcats some other time. And of course, Skeleton Warrior. Sadly, and especially really sad for me, Skeleton Warrior got cancelled very shortly. Uh, Maybe, like I said, they were just too scary for children. But I loved them, and there were so many cool characters in the cartoon that never got made. So if any toy maker is to revive the line and make modern scale, modern size Skeleton Warrior, my wallet will be so hurting. My credit card, my bank account will be so hurting, but I won't be able to resist it because these skeletons are just so bloody cool. Um, like I said, these action figures, even though they were made in the mid 90s, they were really well made. They were large too. They, like this Dr. Cyborn figure, even though he's made in the mid 90s, where most action figures were 5 inches, he is 6 inches tall. And let me bring Mr. Fantastic back into the frame, and you guys will see that he is not that much smaller than an action figure that's made today. Like, yeah, he's slightly shorter by maybe, I don't know, half an inch, but he would definitely fit in with your 6-inch display, even with a modern action figure. And when you display him next to action figures from the same era, other action figures from the 90s, like Magneto here from uh, Toy Biz, Marvel Universe, you can tell that these skeleton warriors were huge. Like Dr. Cyborg just towers over Magneto. Uh, so he's definitely very large and well made for his time. And here it's him standing next to a more modern made skeleton that just came out a couple like last year or the year before by Storm Collectible. Now this is the import, right? This skeleton on the left, well your left, on his right. This skeleton is from the Golden Axe video game series. It's the one of the lizard skeletons. I can't remember the actual name of this guy off the top of my head, but that's what it is. It's basically a lizard man skeleton. Now this thing's expensive. Okay, this thing costs like 40 bucks, 50 bucks. While Dr. Cyborn, made in the mid 90s, back then you could get him for like I don't know, 6 bucks, 7 bucks. Yeah, how time has changed. But you can see that if they can take modern technology and do skeleton warriors in modern look, this would be really, really awesome. So you may think, well, how come you're just telling us about the figures and history? How come you haven't talked about the backstory of the character? Oh well, because that's kind of how I learned about the like I said, I knew about them as toys first. I didn't know any backstory. And this is, to me, the strength of a toy line. Like if your toy line is going to sell, even when people don't know anything about it, like if people see it on the shelf and go, whoa, that is so cool. I I'm going to get it. It doesn't matter what the story is. Then that to me that is the strength of the toy line. Now, unfortunately, Skeleton Warrior, like I said, I mean, cartoon for kids, especially cartoon in the mid 90s, story kind of sucks, and Dr. Cyborn's story is really not that much. Basically, he's a mad scientist in the kingdom. I can't remember what the kingdom is called in the cartoon that this all this went down. So this he's a scientist. He likes to experiment and invent new things. And then one time, while he was experimenting with some new technology, things blew up and he almost got killed. And it was then, when he grafted a whole bunch of cybernetics to his body, he replaced his arm with a robotic arm, and his leg have to be reinforced, and his skull has to be reinforced, and he continued to uh, study science even after an accident like that, even though it turned him into a half robot, half human freak. Now, one thing that always bothered Dr. Cyborg was he knew that no matter how great the science was, one day he was going to get old and one day he was going to die and he would never be able to study science anymore. So when Baron Dark grabbed half of the sacred crystal and got turned into skeleton and started turning his minions into skeleton warriors and undead creatures, Dr. Cyborn saw this as a perfect opportunity because he realized that if he got turned into a skeleton warrior, he would never age. He would never die. Like these skeleton warriors, even when you smash them to little bits and pieces, they could reassemble. I mean, how cool is that? Like, these are not skeletons that you can just smack in the head and they die. No, these skeleton warriors, as long as the crystal was there, they would never die. They could always reform, reanimate, and continue on. That is a pretty scary and cool concept. So Dr. Cyborg realized that if he stayed with the good guys, yeah, he would gradually age and die, and he had to leave all his scientific studies behind. But if he joined Baron Dark and become a skeleton, then he could continue to study science. So yeah, I guess as far as motives go, we can't really blame the poor guy. Like his motive actually makes sense. So he did. He went and joined the evil side, the dark side, and got himself turned into a skeleton warrior. And yeah, it became undying. And unfortunately, that's pretty much where his interesting story ends. Because after that, all we see him ever do is in the cartoon, he creates something new and say, "Hey, Baron Dark, look at what I created. This is like the newest gun, or this is the newest laser, or this is something that can destroy the planet, or this is something that can yeah, like you get my drift. He's that guy, that annoying guy in the background that in the beginning of every episode that say, I got it! I got the perfect way to deal with those pesky humans. And then you just know it. They're going to go out and try it, and then get their bony skeleton butts handed to them by the good guys by the end of the episode. And then Dr. Cyborg would be trashing his laboratory, throwing a tantrum, like imbeciles. I'm surrounded by imbeciles, like things like that. Yeah. So yeah, as story go, it's simple, but like I said, at least the motive is kind of understandable and believable. But it's so cool as an action figure. Like I said it this so many times, I'm gushing over not just this action figure, but all the skeletons in Skeleton Warriors. It's such a cool toy line. And Dr. Cyborg, being a half robot skeleton, just adds that much more flair to it. I mean, just look at the sculpture details in the bones and the machine parts and how it all come together. In the 90s, when most other action figures were basic human body smooth, smooth superhuman body type, just painted with different lines. Something like this was bloody amazing. Now, obviously, because he's an action figure from from the mid 90s, there's not much articulation comparing to especially figures today. However, comparing to action figures of his time, his articulation is pretty good. He has a hinged jaw that he can open and close his mouth. His head can turn left, right, and all the way around. Hey, he's a skeleton. He can do whatever he wants. His arms can swing up and down at the shoulder. His waist can turn left and right. His legs can kick back and forth at the hip. And on his left leg, because it's mechanical, it also has a knee joint. So yeah, I mean, compared to most figures back in the 90s where they only moved at the neck, shoulder, and hip, this is quite an amazingly articulated action figure, and like I already pointed out, larger, and way more detailed than most other action figures of its time. It really boggles the mind that this toy line did not succeed. And this is not all that he has to offer. Because in addition to having more articulation than other action figure of his time and being bigger, he also comes with a lot of accessories. First, he comes with a nice solid cape that can make him look more imposing. He also comes with a little mace mallet thing that he can use to do hand-to-hand close quarter combat against his enemy with. Either that or, being a doctor, scientist, bending over equipment all day long. He might be kind of stiff and sore, so maybe he just needs something like that to massage some achy skeletal joints. He also comes with this weird little two-pronged device. I think it's called a molecular ionizer. I'm not quite sure what it's supposed to do. Maybe it's something that only makes sense in the cartoon. Maybe it's supposed to like shoot some kind of laser that make you turn into a skeleton, or I don't know. But it's a weird looking little device that looks a little bit like a handheld hair dryer. And perhaps the biggest piece of equipment he comes with is this giant cannon that is called a acid cannon. It shoots acid or something like that in the show. Just look at how big that thing is. It honestly, if I don't have him on the display stand, it's really hard to pose him with that cannon because it's so big. It would pull him off balance because his skeletal frame is so light and uh, he doesn't have enough weight to counterbalance it. Again, let me remind you, this is supposedly a cartoon for kids, and yet here's a skeleton armed with a cannon that fire acid that would melt the flesh off of living human. Yeah, I don't know, a little bit too violent. I mean, probably not for Asian children because, like, if you look at the kind of stuff that Japanese and Taiwanese children grow up watching, this is pretty middle of the road. But for North America here, yeah, this was a little bit too ambitious, I think. The cannon is actually spring-loaded, and there is a missile that can fire from the tip. But I'm not going to demonstrate that on screen. Last time I did that, it took me half an hour to find where the bloody thing went. Um, there is also a piece of armor on his right leg that can be removed. I'm not quite sure what the significance of that is. Uh, like I don't understand why that thing is removable. It doesn't make sense. But it's there. So overall, this skeleton came with a lot of stuff for the money you pay, and he's not the only one. Almost every skeleton warrior came with loads of accessories. Probably not as much as him, but these were awesome, awesome toys if you needed some skeleton uh, army to fight your heroes with. I really love this toy line, as if you can't tell. So anyway, I am glad that I finally get a chance to gush over and talk about one of the characters. And I know this is a bit of a far stretch for National Doctor's Day, but hey, Doctor Cyborn is was a doctor. We can't prejudice against him just because he's a skeleton doctor. So anyway, there you have it. We'll be back again tomorrow for Fitness Friday. For now, have a good rest of the day.